I'm not used to getting up this early. All right, good to see you all. I'm glad that we have this opportunity to be together today. And I want to thank Brother Gary for posting the lesson for today. I sent him 2 copies of the class instead of the class and the lesson. And I caught it last night when it's like, I just looked at that, and it's like, that's the same lesson. So then I sent it, and Gary had to swap it out. So this one, the first sheet didn't have the title on it. But today I want to talk about determining family priorities. We have a lot of things that compete for our time, and we get awfully busy. Sometimes we need to take inventory and evaluate and kind of simple down our lives. That while we may be doing a whole lot of things, do those things really have meaning? And are they really important? Do you ever notice there's just enough stuff to do to fill up a whole day? Some of our stuff we can simple down, and we need to determine what are the priorities. When we talk to families that are having issues and troubles, many times in a court, when they go to a court and they get a divorce or they're trying to get a divorce, the thing on the paper is irreconcilable differences. That's the leading trend in causes of divorce, whatever that means, irreconcilable differences. But I want to suggest that's Satan's lie, that there are no differences that are irreconcilable, that any conflict has a resolution. Now, people may not want to accept the resolution, but all conflicts have resolution if the parties are willing to work to achieve that as the goal. Marriages are not hopeless. In other words, just as a marriage may go the wrong way, and it seems like, this just isn't going to work, then I want to suggest that just like God could raise people from the dead, he can raise a dead marriage. He can breathe into a marriage a breath of life that makes that marriage come alive again. That will not be instant or anything miraculous. It will come as a result of the husband and the wife working together to cause that marriage to be revived. It will take both. It will take us being willing to lay aside the past, to have a forgiving heart, and to be able to hit the reset button and to start in the day where we are. It is high time to stop fighting in marriages and to start fighting for our marriages. Satan is not going to win. And when there is conflict in a husband-wife relationship, victory is possible. But victory comes with a lot of work and a lot of planning. It takes at least 2 to fight, and it'll take the same number to make up. If one person's not fighting, it's hard to have a fight. Many lessons on marriage end up kind of breaking out or dividing our time out as to, well, what's it going to take to provide or to look at what our priorities are in our marriage. And many lessons will do the pie concept, and they'll say, well, you need to have the spiritual time, the social time, your work and your school and your physical and your biological. The important thing to decide is maybe not so much how to chop up our life, but how to put meaning in each one of those areas of our life to decide what our priorities are and what we want those to be in our marriage. In other words, as we mentioned in the class, the question is, why are we married? What are we trying to accomplish? If we were in a secular business, then that secular business would have a mission statement. And that mission statement is going to be, here's what we do. It will be concise, it will have 2 or 3 points, and it drives what that company does. In the same way, our homes need to have, we need to understand what the mission is. Church has a mission. We know what that is. Evangelism, edification, limited benevolence. We know what it is. Edify one another. We know the mission of the church. And that drives what we do and what we don't do. In the same way, in our homes, what are we trying to accomplish in our homes? I'm going to have a little bit more to say about that a little later in this lesson. But many times people just kind of wander in their marriage. They don't know why they're married. They don't know what they're trying to accomplish. And because of that, they miss their targets often because they don't know what the target is. Well, it's important to decide what our priorities are. Otherwise, it's easy to get real lopsided or to get focused on, well, our priority is to make money, to have as many jobs as we can, to get as much income as we can, so that we can be successful and happy in life. That doesn't happen, by the way. Henry David Thoreau made this statement, or one similar to it. The great tragedy of life is to come to its end only to realize you never lived. In other words, that what we do is we spend each day, but we have no value added, and after a while the time's gone. And we look back at what is the legacy? What did we accomplish? Did we make a change? Did we affect anyone's life? And that's a question we all have to answer. The Bible tells us life is short. It's like a vapor that appears for a small time and then fades away. So what we do between birth and death not only determines our destiny, but it determines what we leave behind as our legacy. Consider the rich fool. He put his focus on what's going to fade away. I'll tear down my barns and build greater. For several years, I was working with a company here in Indianapolis, providing their social services with them. And they were in the housing industry. One thing I noted is that we would get together, and they were in the apartment business, and we'd get together with various funders, and the funders would talk about how buildings are usually only planned to be good for about 30 years, and then they're torn down, you build something else. Or you renovate them, which often is more costly than rebuilding. And what that tells me is what's built today and thrills us today, 30 years from now, it'll probably be gone. And just be an empty lot again or something else in its place. Stuff in life doesn't last. What thrills us today may not even be there tomorrow. But what does last is our souls. What does last is the value that we add to life. Now this lesson goes beyond the pie chart of the spiritual and the social and the church and work and so forth. It goes beyond that. We'll save that for some other time, some other person. But I want to look at our passage in Ephesians, because I'm afraid many times in marriage, people take Ephesians 4 that was read with us, and they take that and beat each other over the head with it. Husbands and wives. You're supposed to be in subjection to me. God said so. Well, you're supposed to love me like Christ loved the church, and here we go. But what we don't do is we don't always look at those verses in their context. That's what I want to do this morning. Because long before he addressed the husband and wife, he addressed the Christian character in both the husband and wife and others. And so he talks about the characters. I'm going to back up and pick up the context of Ephesians 5. And he tells us how we ought to be in the way we are as people. Until we put ourselves together, we are going to have a broken marriage. When you put two broken people together, you don't come out with something that's whole. You come out with something usually that's more broken. So Paul in Ephesians chapter 4 starting tells us how to build the quality of character so we have something to offer not only to God, but to other people, and that makes quality in our own lives. And so I want to start back at the end of chapter 4 and move forward to our passages that we're very familiar with on subjection and how much you're supposed to love your wife. So let's back up a little bit and see if we can find something about quality. So look at Ephesians chapter, not 5, but chapter 4. And let's look at this together. In chapter 4 and verse 25, he says, talking about the quality of character, this before he even gets into the home, he says what you need to do is you need to be truthful. Putting away lies. Speak every man truth with his neighbor. For we're members one of another. Putting away lying. I can't tell you the number of times as I have counseled with Christian families that I hear the statement, well, I can't trust anything he says. I can't believe what he's saying. Well, I have an old Bible with me today, and it has antifreeze in it, and it has a page torn off. All right, here's the page. All right, now he says here, verse 25, wherefore, putting away falsehood, speak truth, every one with his neighbor, for we're members one of another. That's who we are. And what he says is, to build the quality of character that is going to make a good marriage, he'll talk about later, we need to be honest with each other. Who lies? Do you know a study was done, 91% of Americans lie routinely about matters that are trivial? People who aren't Christians, they're just used to not telling the truth, just kind of make up stuff. 91%. I don't know about you, but that's kind of a scary number. I don't know that I would want to be around people that didn't tell me the truth. But I am. And the question would be, are we truthful? Do we speak truth with our neighbor? Or do we kind of maybe soften it up? 1 out of 3 lie about things that are important, and often because they think they're in trouble. 86% of people admit, children I should say, people still at home, they admit they lie on a regular basis to their parents. 75% said they lied to their friends. And 7 out of 10 people said they lie to their spouses. How are we going to build relationships if they're built on lies? You don't know what to believe. You don't know what to trust. So therefore, the Bible tells us, put that away. Quit doing that. And in place of that, speak truth. Now, when we talk about preparation for Christianity and preparation for our home, we can't build a home on lies. If you're married to a liar, how are you going to have an intimate relationship if you can't trust him? Well, lying does affect the relationship. It disrupts the unity. It creates conflict, especially when someone gets caught in a lie. It annihilates trust, and ultimately it destroys the relationship. And for the Christian, it shows that Christ is not in the communication. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth. Hold on right there. Jesus is the truth. To the degree that we love the truth, to that degree we love Jesus. He's the truth. Who's the liar? Satan is the liar and the father thereof, Paul told the Corinthians. So the question is, who's my daddy? Who's my father? If Jesus is the truth, do I side with him? But if I decide to live and tell lies and be deceitful and dishonest, then who's my daddy? The devil. Now that raises a question when it comes to mate selection. Does a child of God want to marry a child of the devil? And so in preparation for a good home, we need to get rid of lying, because we want to acknowledge that the Father, that heaven, that deity is our Father and not Satan. So what do? We speak truth with our neighbor. We speak truth with everyone. We are known for our honesty. Our yea is yea and our nay is nay. And whatever is not of that is of the evil one. You can't build a relationship if honesty, integrity, and truth are not valued. And so when we talk about priorities, truth needs to be a priority in our Christian life as well as in our family life. We value truth. Now, I tell you what, telling the truth will get you in trouble sometimes, because people don't always want to hear the truth, and it's not always comfortable to tell the truth. When we do something wrong, I don't know anybody that likes to be scolded, do you? But what we know is that when we do something wrong, we need to promptly admit it and ask for forgiveness and get past that thing. Some people say, well, I don't know how to do that. I've been lying most of my life. I open my mouth and here comes one. Well, the way you do that is like this. Time out. I need to rewind and say that again. Would you give me that grace? And then correct it. My torn out page is coming further apart. Anyway, all right. So we need to time out, do a self-correct, and move on and have grace from the other person. That doesn't mean we need to quiz and fuss and have a all-day affair out of it. You can never have a marriage of oneness if your spouse fails to be authentic, genuine, and honest with you. You can't have a marriage of trust if somebody's sneaking around on the other one trying to get away with something, being dishonest. A life of unity and a harmony in marriage can't be lived with someone who's two-faced. There will always be conflict and division in that relationship. Now, verse 26, he goes on again with the context. Be ye angry and sin not, let not the sun go down on your wrath. I run into Christians sometimes say, oh, it's sinful to be angry. No, it's not. It's commanded. Do you know that? That's what that says. Be ye angry. Is that a command? Sounds like it. And sin not. What he's saying is, it's okay to be angry, but don't take it too far. It's okay to be angry, but don't you get caught up in this wrong. In other words, you're doing what they're doing, or maybe you throw out some words you shouldn't, or say some attitudes that you shouldn't be having or saying. So anger needs to know boundaries. And then he says, don't let the sun go down on your wrath. Notice he talks about anger and wrath. Those are two kind of different things. Anger kind of seethes. You know what I mean? Kind of on a low boil. Wrath is explosive. And he says, don't do either one of them. Don't bottle up your anger. When you bottle up your anger, you know what? You create all kinds of health problems for yourself. One of the working definitions for depression is anger turned inward, anger turned on ourselves. I'm mad, but I can't say anything about it. I don't want to say it. I don't want to have a fuss. I don't want to talk about what's bugging me or some event from my past. So I just walk around angry all the time. Guess what? That produces anxiety, depression, all kinds of stress issues It creates health issues for us, and ultimately will kill us early. Don't explode in your anger. That a loose tongue can cause a lot of damage. Long after we forget what we're fussing about, we remember the hurtful words that were said. Those hurtful words don't often go away. Sometimes people say, you say you didn't mean it, you say you're sorry, I can forgive you, but you still said it, which means you felt it. And so the hurt stays. It's hard to undo. Watch a loose tongue. And then he says, don't let the sun go down in your wrath. I think that means don't go to bed early. One fellow said that he didn't get much sleep in his marriage, but tried to reconcile their time together. Verse 29, now he goes on a step further. And he tells us that we need to play nice. Here's how he said it. Let no corrupt speech proceed out of your mouth, but such as is good for edifying, that it may give grace to them that hear. All right. So what does he say? He says, use the kind of language that will build each other up. Now that doesn't mean that we need to go around flattering each other all the time. Flattery is usually insincere. But genuine praise. Look for what's good in the other person. What's good in the situation that you're in. And there will be good things there. But in our American culture, we have a way of looking at what's wrong. But this passage tells us that we need to look at things that are right. What are some things I can compliment? You know, I may be sorry that somebody said something to me. However, I appreciate you being honest about it. That's a compliment. That's a compliment. We can take something and we can have both a criticism and a praise. So I suggest that we talk nicely to each other, things that build each other up. In our last lesson, we talked about being careful that we don't tear each other down, rip each other to shreds, make each other feel insignificant. Play nice. Watch the words that come out of our mouth and ask the question, as this text says, does it benefit the person that's hearing it? That may benefit us in terms of helping to correct that person. Or it may benefit us, it may benefit the one listening in terms of encouraging them. Someone said that about 90 to 95% of our words are words that are negative. We look for what's wrong and not what's right. And I tell you what, that often starts at the first of the day. We get up and we turn the TV on and we want to find out who got shot on the east side. We are on the east side, by the way. At least in the middle of town, that's what we look at. But you all may look at what about the west side. But anyway, we want to see who got shot and what calamity happened. Where's the last tsunami and what's the weather and who's getting burned up and who's getting drowned and all that. We look at all that and we start our day off and our stomach goes, ugh. And now we go out in our day and we're all uptight, we're upset. And I need to figure out how to turn that back. I did it again, sorry. All right. But yeah, we get all upset in the day. Oh. And now that we, yeah, I can get it from there. Okay. I'm going to quit playing with the side of this thing. All right, so we're going to play nice. Be careful what comes out of our mouth. Be careful with the words we say and the criticisms that we make. Now, I want to talk about how you define your spouse. And I'm talking to husbands, wives, and we could say, how do you define your children? If I were to say, and I do say this to people every day, members of the church, tell me about your wife. Tell me about your husband. And I know they usually come to me with problems, so I expect to get negative. But how do you define your mate? So if you were introducing your mate and you wanted to present them, would you talk about who they are, what they do? Well, this is my wife. She's the grouchiest thing on the top side of the earth. You sure don't want to even try to talk to her before she has coffee. Is that how you're going to introduce her? Or, this is my husband. You know, he thinks work's more important than me. He's married to his job. Is that how you're going to introduce your husband? Now, I want to ask you, how are you going to define your spouse? And I suggest that if we see our spouse as someone that needs to be elevated, that is someone we appreciate, then we talk about the qualities of that appreciation. Don't define him in the negative. Define him the way God does. Edify your spouse, pray for your spouse. And then Hebrews 10, verse 24, talking to Christians in general, says, and let us consider one another to provoke to love and good works. Now, I know that's not a marriage passage, but it is a passage about what Christians do with each other. And if both of those people in that marriage are Christians, this is what we do with each other. We encourage to love and good works. That applies to all Christians. Now, let's keep going. In a marriage, we need to assure that Christ is the center of the marriage. Let's keep going. Verse 32 now. And what it says here in verse 32, it says, let all bitterness... better stop there a second. Some people are bitter with each other. I'm mad over something you did years ago, and I'm getting a lot of mileage out of it. And anytime we fuss, I'll bring it up again. What am I supposed to do with that? I'm supposed to put it away from me. You know that word put away is like divorce. Divorce it. Put it away. Get it out of here. In order for love to grow, some things have to go. And one of those is bitterness. There are some ways to do that. That's not the topic for today, but it has to go. And wrath. He talked about don't let the sun go down your wrath, but here he tells us to get that out of here. And also anger. He's also talked about what to do with that. And clamor. You know what clamor is? Bickering. Everybody know what bickering is? That's yow-yow. Bickering. Is yow-yow even an English word? It's a Southern word. All right. Get that out of your life. And railing. Do you know the word railing is the word for blasphemy? And that we not only can blaspheme God, we can blaspheme each other. By talking negatively, derogatory. How would you blaspheme God? By using his name in vain? By maybe acting like he's a curse? He says to do that here. Get that out of your life. And he talks about putting away malice. That word malice means meanness. Quit being so mean. Get that out of your life. Now he's talking to all Christians here, but he's building up, and he's going to talk about marriage in a minute. But this is what we bring to the marriage, this kind of person. And then he tells us, as we put away all those things, he tells us to be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave us. Does anybody here doesn't need forgiveness? If you do, raise your hand. I just want to see who you are. Okay? And then I want to talk to you afterwards. We all mess up. All have sinned, all fall short of the glory of God. There are no perfect people. The only perfect one got crucified. And what that means is that we need to be humble enough to own our mistakes, to ask for forgiveness, to learn from them, and to grow, and not have someone rub our nose in them all the time. We all need forgiveness. And then it says that we're to be imitators of Christ as beloved children. And he goes on, tells us things that need to be cleaned up in our life. And I ask the question when it comes to bitterness, where are you going to spend your time? If I spend my time in the past, I've got 50%, 60, 70% of my time in the past about all the bad things that have happened to me, people who have hurt me, traumas that have happened in my life. And if I live there, then I will bring the past into the present, and I will not have a very happy life because I've got unfinished business with my past that I need to close, finish, and if I can't get it closed, I need to turn it over to God, and he will take care of it. Vengeance is mine. I will recompense, says the Lord. It is not my job, nor your job, to wreak vengeance on someone else. If it's beyond our ability to handle, we need to turn it over to God. There's a lady who was very bitter. Her grandchild had been drowned, a third grader actually, and drowned in the bathtub after school one day, and the stepmother was the only one home. There was investigation. They couldn't find enough evidence to move forward with that, and so that grandmother, if was going to see the other grandchild, had to go into the home of the woman who was with the grandchild that was drowned. And she believed that stepmother did something. And she had a big problem with bitterness. Until finally one day she decided there's nothing absolutely I can do about it. But there's someone who can. And that's God. That kept her from being a member of the church. Kept her from baptism. Until she turned that over to God, knowing God would do the right thing. And she was baptized into Christ and is a faithful Christian today. But she had to let that bitterness go. It was destroying her. Sometimes we get angry at people over things they've done to us. And it's kind of like when we want to show attitude toward them, it's kind of like drinking a bunch of poison and hoping the other person dies. Not going to happen. But it'll destroy me. So what do? We let it go. We either resolve it by dealing with it where we can, and then the rest we have to leave to God. Well, we can spend our time in the past. That's going to fix it where I'm not living my life. Or we can spend our time in the future. Those are the dreamers. So I asked the question, where do you spend your time? And what someone has decided is a fair split on that is 60% of your time you spend in your present. 20% of your time you spend planning for your future. And 20% of your time you deal with your past. Those are the stories and the anecdotal things that people talk about around their table, and what great-grandpa did, and how even my great-grandfather objected to his own wedding. He knew there was some spot he had to say, I do. And so he said, I do. And anybody here no reason they shouldn't be married? And he said, I do. So that's one of those stories that you talk about. That's from the past. Well, they got married. That's the end of that story. And they had lots of kids and grandkids and great-grandkids. So what percentage of the time do we spend in that? In living with the past, we have a lot of emotions and issues that pile up. Unfinished business. And that unfinished business turns to anger. Anger has 3 R's. That's how I remember it. Regret, resentment, and retaliation. Now, when a person's angry, they'll do 1 or 3 or all of those. And that leads to resentment, bitterness, maliciousness, these things that we're supposed to put away. So what we're really saying here is that we need to get the things out of our life to clean our character up to where we have something to present, not only to God, but something quality to present to the people that are around us. And who wants to be with a mean, bitter, angry, malicious person? Who wants to be with them? So you have something to present. There's a fellow from Indiana State Prison. There was a movie actually made there, a treatment movie. And he was a very angry man, and he was preparing a letter to read to his father, stepfather, who had molested him and abused him severely as a child. And they were doing an empty chair exercise, and he was reading this letter that he was going to present to this stepfather. The letter went something like this. I've hated you every day of my life. I have planned your murder. I've cursed your name. I've done everything I can to destroy you. And what I realize is I didn't destroy you. I destroyed me. And I'm here in prison, and I'm about to be released. And today, I forgive you. And I ask you to forgive me. What you did is not the topic of my letter. But I need to ask for your forgiveness for the attitudes I've had towards you. First time I heard that, I thought, that's the strangest thing I've heard in a long time. To ask your perpetrator to forgive you. But what he was really addressing is the bitterness and the anger, the hatred that he had for another human being. And he realized that was wrong. And he was trying to fix that. Yeah? When we carry bitterness and anger and all that in us, then it's going to do something to us. How would you like to have been in the Jerusalem church? Sometimes I think that'd be great. But suppose you were there and one morning, Brother Paul walks in and sits down by Sister Stephen. So you have the man that was going around arresting people, working with the enemy, the Sanhedrin, and he's coming in and sitting down by you. He's going to take the Lord's Supper with you and do all that. You think maybe there might have been any kind of struggles? Well, if there were, they got them straightened out. What's alternatives we can have to bitterness and anger? Well, it can treat us like cancer. Now let's keep moving. Chapter 5, verse 1 and 2. Now he moves here. So in chapter 5, he talks about the kind of person you ought to be and how to get your life cleaned up. Covetousness, uncleanness, filthiness, foolish talking, vulgar joking, things that are not befitting. And then he says, but rather give thanks. I'm going to speed up a little bit. But rather give thanks. Here's a person that the quality of their Christian character is they have a thankful spirit. And then we keep moving on. So, as we get through this, he tells us now that we are supposed to be in subjection one to another. If you drop down in verse 21. subjecting yourselves to one another in the fear of Christ. So what are we supposed to do? Did you know the wife's not the only one supposed to be in subjection? We all are to be in subjection to each other. What does that mean? That means putting the other ahead of ourselves. And that's what every Christian does. Every Christian husband is commanded to be in subjection. And every Christian wife is too. Every Christian is. So we subject ourselves, what? To the will of Christ. And to one another. And what that means is, it's not a me society in Christ. We consider others better than ourselves. That's the kind of person now that Paul's talking about in this context that comes into this marriage. I said all that to say that one sentence. Here's who we bring to the marriage. That's the Christian character of the man and the woman who now come that are interested in serving Christ. That's how you subject yourself, both of you. And now, in the marriage relationship, we take this to a different level. And that level now is that the wife subjects herself to the husband. And I think basically what that is talking about is in a family, someone has to make some ultimate decisions. And he has the husband as the head of the wife, as the leader of the home, and that's a problem for us in our culture. Because many husbands don't step up. They're not the spiritual leaders in their family. They leave that for the wife or for the church. And as a result, things get real skewed as to what the duties and responsibilities are. But I want to suggest to you, backing up a little bit, that if people had the attitudes talked about in chapter 4 and early part of chapter 5, then there wouldn't be irreconcilable differences. Because both will be acting as Christians, working toward how do we come to resolution on any issue, any Christian. That's how you do it. And it doesn't start with what the problem is, it starts with what the attitude toward the problem is. And what the attitude toward each other is. When we get that where it needs to be, we can figure out how to deal with conflict. When we can figure out it's not all about my way or no way, then once we figure that out, now we can figure this out. Now let me wrap up by saying this. That there are no irreconcilable differences. If husband and wife are both Christians and act like Christians, you can resolve anything. And he tells us here that wives are supposed to be in subjection to their husband in everything as unto the Lord. Just like you submitted yourself to Jesus, submit yourself to your husband. Now, that doesn't mean that, well, we won't go there right now. All right, and then he says that the husband is the head of the wife. That's where it's saying the husband has to step up. If he is the head, he needs to exercise the leadership role. He's the spiritual leader of the family. He needs to step up and do that. How does he do that? Well, some ways might be that we pray with our family. I certainly think that would be on that. And we initiate that. We don't wait for someone else to ask us. We talk about the Lord in our homes. And that's not something we wait for the other one to do. When we're out by the way and we see things, we can make Bible illustrations or illustrations of, Jesus talked about people that were fishing. Jesus talked about ants. Consider the ant. Look how hard they're working. Go to the ant, thou sluggard. And we can teach our kids lessons about life. Here's one of the great issues with husbands and wives in our culture is we bring children into the world and expect them a lot of times to figure out things by themselves. And here's what happens. And I'm going to talk about pornography later this week. Actually, tomorrow night. And here's one of the things happens is we don't do our job, but Satan does his job. And if we don't step up and do what moms and dads, husbands and wives, we don't demonstrate, here's how husbands and wives act together, then you don't have a model when it comes your time to be a husband or a wife. You don't have any role model of what this looks like. And when it comes to kids and growing up and going through the developmental things, as I said a moment ago, Satan often becomes the tutor. The facts of life, husband-wife relationship, human sexuality. Those things are often left up to the devil to do the teaching, and he's doing a good job and has corrupted our culture, and part of that is because we as husbands and wives don't step up and do our job. What is your mission? Why are you married? As I said earlier in the class, many people have trouble answering that question. What are you trying to accomplish? I ask people, well, why'd y'all get married? Well, we fell in love. We decided that we dated long enough, it's time to get married. That's not a good reason to get married. You don't marry everybody you fall in love with. Huh. So why are you married? Now each one of you needs to answer that for yourself. But then the second question is, what are you trying to accomplish in your home? And so I recommend to you as a homework assignment, to develop a mission statement. And that statement is going to answer the question, why are we married and what are we trying to accomplish? It'll look something like this. Our home is a place where Christ is honored and friends and family are welcome. Our home is a place where we don't go to bed angry. That's in here. Our home is a place that provides safety and a refreshing environment for our friends and our family and all that we welcome with hospitality. That's what we do. That's why we exist. Now, when you say what it is you do, then that also eliminates what you don't do. That if it's those things or things like that we just mentioned, then your home, the things that don't fit, cussing and fussing and drugging and drinking and chaos, those don't fit. So when you define your mission, you define what you do, but by exclusion, you define what you don't do. And I suggest that you may want to have a talk with each other about that, husbands and wives. Have a talk about what do we do? What are we trying to accomplish here? And ultimately, the goal of the home is to help everybody to be encouraged to go to heaven. Now, I tell you what, that's going to curb a lot of disagreements. But we need to be true to our mission. Well, there are many things we could say, but I want to leave us with this idea. And that is, if husbands love their wives like Christ loved the church, Christ never did anything to make us think he didn't care for us. Never did anything to make us think that. He did everything to make us know how much he cares for us. 1 Corinthians 7, and we end with this. Paul talks about the husband and wife in a context of a distress that they're having, whatever that is. And he says that the one that is married, the man who is married, looks to his wife how he might please her. Likewise, the wife to her husband, how she might please him. Paul cites that as the norm in a marriage. That here are Christian couple, and they are out here in mission somehow. Paul's talking about spreading the gospel and so forth and that. And he says that the husband and the wife are a little diverted from their mission because they're interested in how they please each other. That's the norm. That's the way it's supposed to be. It's not what I want, and if you don't want it, that's tough. I'm going to do it anyway. But it's, honey, what's it going to take to please you today? You may not say it quite that way. Certainly not with a tone. But what can we do today? And some of that we can figure out for ourselves. We don't have to ask. But that argues communication. And I encourage us in a society that is corrupt and that is attacking home and family, husbands and wives need to stick together and look at ways they might please one another and the Lord first. When we do that, we have the core of a family, the core of a community, the core of a nation, and the core of what it takes to be leaders in the Lord's church. The core of what it takes to spread the gospel. And other people can see the light of Jesus in us and in our families, and they can say, we want a family like that too. God knew what he was talking about. And so he's told us. And it's our job to create that environment following his directions. So we bring strength of character to the marriage, and we build strong relationships within the marriage. That's our lesson today. And I would wonder if there's any here today that need to make confession of error in their lives. We're going to sing a song of encouragement. Or if there are those that are struggling and need some special prayers. Or if there are those who have decided, you know what, Christ's way is the best way. Today I want to give my life to him. I've heard the gospel. I believe it. I've repented of my sins. I confess that Jesus is the Son of God, and I want to be buried in the water of baptism today for the remission of my sins. Are there such people here today? Are there people of courage that will say, Satan may have reigned in my life, but he will do that no more. Today I give him up. Today I resist the devil. And today I accept Jesus. And if you're here and have the courage, we ask you to come forward while we stand and sing.